Welcome, everybody, to the 10th and final event of the third season of 20 Summers. It's been a great season, and I'm a little sad to see it come to an end. I want to introduce these people on stage who have coordinated themselves so beautifully for this evening of style. Garance Doré, who we've been so excited to nab for this season, is a writer, illustrator, and photographer whose eponymous blog reaches millions of readers. The New York Times Magazine has called her the guardian of all style. She has won the Council of Fashion Designers of America's Eugenia Sheppard Media Award and is the author of the 2015 bestseller, Love, Style, Life. Interviewing Garance will be Ricky Opaterny. Ricky is a creative director, editor, and photographer. He is currently a partner at the New York-based technology, consulting, and startup studio Hanger. Before that, he worked for Google, a search engine type concern where he was the executive producer of At Google, the company's online series of talks, lectures, conversations, and concerts. On top of all that, Ricky, along with me, Julia Glass, and Joshua Prager, who cannot be here this evening, is one of the co-founders and directors of 20 Summers. And Josh is the uber brain and creator behind this entire project. But it was all the way back in 2009 when Josh called Ricky, who then lived on the West Coast, and me, I live in Massachusetts, and told us that he had fallen in love with a barn in Provincetown. And the rest is a very long and complicated history, but I have to tell you that 20 Summers has gone through many permutations, and we would not be here were it not for the astonishing know-how and common sense of Ricky, because Josh and I are really kind of a pair of dreamers. Ricky is also a dreamer, but this is the first time that Ricky has been on stage through 3 seasons, and I am so excited to welcome him here and to thank him for all that he has put into this astonishing project. And I'm hoping that he'll be back a lot now that he lives on the East Coast, because he's moved to the East Coast. And I would just love to have a round of applause for Ricky, because he's been such a moving force behind this. Thank you, Ricky. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ricky and Garance.
Thank you, Julie, for the lovely introduction. I was coming here on the train yesterday from New York and thinking back to some early conversations that we had with Isaac Mizrahi, because I was listening to the podcast interview that you did with him, and he was one of our early supporters and had all these dreams for what we could do related to fashion in this space. And it's thrilling to finally get that started here tonight with you, Garance. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.
So it sounds like you're spending more time on Cape Cod now.
Well, I really wanted to come. I really wanted to discover first, as a French person, it's like you have this kind of dream of, you know, what it feels like and what it looks like and everything. And then now living here in America and working with this delightful lady here, Emily. She's been coming here with Josh, her boyfriend, for a few years.
Not our Josh.
Not your Josh, another Josh is here. And she's been telling me how wonderful. And I was like, I have to come, I have to. And so this was the perfect occasion, and it's even better than what I thought it was. So now I want to go around, visit everything. It's amazing. And the food. like the fish. And
Lobster roll?
Lobster, cod earlier. What did we had? It's so good.
Have you noticed any similarities between this place and Corsica, where you're from, where you grew up?
Well, I come from a fisherman kind of place, but it's so different. It's Corsica it's an island in the Mediterranean, and it's very rocky, and it's a totally. I love it here because it's so calming, and it's so manicured. It's so beautiful, and the landscapes are. Corsica is like an explosion. So it's beautiful, like you have red rocks, but it's more like it gives you strength, but this is more like feel great. I've been sleeping like a baby. Like, it's just been amazing.
So I want to dive a little deeper into your early life in Corsica. And in your book and on your blog, you've cited both your mother and your grandmother as early style influences on you. When did you recognize that there was something special about them in terms of their style and how they carried themselves as women that set them apart from other people?
Well, with my mother, it was pretty easy because in the 80s, she had that moment, like the 80s moment that every woman like kind of went through at that time. So she just arrived with the giant shoulders. Her hair was standing up like this, and the makeup was crazy. 2 days ago, I was at a book signing. Do you remember Pat Cleveland? She was a model in the 80s, and so it was all her friends from Studio 54 that were there, and I was looking around, they were all fantastic, and my mom was like that, just in Corsica. So she was the only one, her and her best friend. And I felt miserable because my friends were like, what? You remember those Jean-Paul Gaultier dresses with the conning, like, yeah, she had that. And she also had like some Alaya that was very, like body, like conscious and all. She was exercising a lot. And she was always smoking like this. And so that was my mother. So I was very conscious, and I didn't want her to be like that. And also, so my dad had a restaurant in a place that's a little bit like here, like a fish restaurant, and that was kind of fancy. So my mom was, at the, like hosting and saying hello to people. But the restaurant was the only fancy place in that. When you stepped out of the restaurant, it was like there was no roads and stuff. So I remember my mom walking on the beach sometimes with her like Mugler dresses and stuff and feeling terrible. So that lasted for 6 or 7 years, something like that, and then quieted down a little bit. But I remember there was a lot of magazines at home, and there was definitely a taste for fashion.
So everyone knows you for your blog, but I learned that it's not your first experience starting something as an entrepreneur. Can you tell me about the business that you started when you were an adolescent in Corsica?
Oh yeah, my first one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to work. I was educated, like, you have to go and work, and you can't be idle in the summer, which obviously was my dream. So my dad had this restaurant, and it was amazing, but I couldn't be a waitress. Like, there was no way. Like, I don't know. It just didn't work with me. I would cry. I was very shy. So people would ask me for something, and I would be like, okay, and go behind the bar and hide. I just couldn't do it. So, for a while I was washing the dishes in the back, but then it was like really like type hard work for a young kid. I was like 14 or something, and so after a while, I realized a few things. So it was a place like this, and boats, like sailboats and yachts and stuff would come, and imagine Italy, like a little creek like that, and boats would come and stay for the night. And I had a tiny boat like that, and my dad had a giant kitchen, and I was like, I'm gonna sell these people croissants. In the morning, I'm just gonna go with my boat and like deliver croissants. And so that was my first business. And I sold them like at an outrageous price. I made the math. And also I was not paying for electricity. The boat was the family boat. And so that was kind of a great business plan. And that's how I paid my studies and all that. It really worked. Like, people are like, what? Like, lost in the middle of Corsica? And my best friend was working with me. So we were like cute girls on the boat. Like, do you want croissants? hot croissant. It was like, it really worked out. So that was the first business.
So it was like a food truck on the water.
Exactly. Like, yeah, that's a great way to reframe that. Yeah, yeah.
What made you think that you could just do something, that you could just start something on your own like that?
I was always trying things because I didn't fit into, as I was saying, like at that time it was, what was offered to me, like waitress at my dad's place, or like, Corsica doesn't have a lot of industries, like the main one is tourism, and I would see all these people coming on the beach. The place where I was very, very small, there is like 30 houses around there, and there is no road, so people can only come with a boat and all that. So that's just like what was available to me, I guess. And as kind of happened later in my life, I realized it's not so much that I'm very forward thinking, it's just that it's very hard for me to do things that I don't believe in or that I don't like. So a lot of times it's not, oh, I want to do this. It's just that everything pushes me out and I have to figure something, which is kind of what happened for the blog later. I was like, I don't find my place in life. Oh, I'm going to try that blog thing.
I think a lot about this quote from Rachel Zoe. She said, style is a way to say who you are without having to speak. And I think a lot of other people have rephrased similar things. When did you first become aware of fashion as a way that you could express yourself, not your mom?
Well, very, very, very early. I think I can't even remember. It was so early that, it was always part of me, part of who I was. I think, again, like where I come from, we have a very Italian culture. It's Corsica. It's very, so there is that idea that you really, you go out on the main street and you walk and you kind of look good, like kind of how they do in Spain. My dad was always conscious of that. People are very conscious of how they dress. It's a little bit less now. I think the culture has changed, but at that time it was really important. Corsica people are very known for, thinking about what car they have and what clothes they have before what they have in their fridge. So people would see like somebody coming, like walking by, like driving by with their fancy car, and they would be like, she eats potatoes. So, we were all very, very conscious of that, and I was that. And for me, the trick was, again, like I wanted to buy fancy clothes, but I didn't have money because my parents were very strict about like what we could do with money. And so I remember moments where I had to be very creative in order to have my own thing going. So that I remember that, like putting a scarf on my head and, trying to go to my mom's closet, and like she would let me borrow some things, and then trying my dad's closet. So kind of mixing stuff because I didn't have access to just going to the store and buying things. And then as I was becoming a teenager and a rebel and all that, just doing everything to piss off my parents and, like ripping my jeans off and everything. And then also, I think it was very linked to being an island person. I was very fascinated by everything that would happen outside of that. So I was reading a lot of magazines. And I started with, French Elle and all that. And very soon, there was this newsstand that had international magazines. And I don't know, I was fascinated. So I started reading American magazines, English, like I was 15, The Face, ID, and the culture started, infusing inside me. And so I started feeling very different from the people around me. And I expressed that a little bit through my style. So nobody understood me.
Can you articulate what it was that you were trying to express then, and how that might be different from what you express now through your style?
It's a good question. I've never thought about that one. I guess at that time I was looking for myself. And so I was looking, style was a great medium. At that time, I didn't have any like real creative outlets. I was a musician, like I was going to the conservatory and stuff, but it was very like more like feeling like school than anything where I could really express myself. I was feeling creative, but I hadn't nailed down any, I was good at drawing, and so clothes were a great way for me, and I think for everybody, to express their creativity, and I think that's where I was finding that.
So let's talk more about drawing.
Yes.
You left Corsica, you went to university,
I did.
you had a pretty normal job in communications, but in a creative industry, film, and then you left to become an illustrator.
Yes.
Can you talk about how you did that?
Sure. I always wanted to be an artist. Since I was a kid, I was very encouraged. It's a weird story because when I was very young, I was very encouraged to be a creative. I was playing cello, I was singing, I was very good, like storyteller, writing, and very good in French, like with words and all that. And I was also drawing all the time. That was my thing. And so my first dream of career was to be making cartoons, you know? And so it was pretty clear for me. I just wanted to do that. But my parents they're immigrants, and they had to fight to build their life and make their money and all that. They were very successful at that time, but when they arrived in Corsica, my mom is from Morocco and my dad is from Italy. You know, so they had that mindset, I think, and me being the firstborn, they were being very good at school and all that, I was carrying so much expectations, right? They wanted me to be a doctor or to be, you know, something serious that could bring the family to that next level where, you know, we're not a restaurant owner or something, we're like notables of the city or something. There was a lot of things like that. So it's funny because I was raised in where I was the artist of the family, and suddenly when I say, okay, I want to study art, suddenly it was like, oh, no, that's not going to happen. You're not going to do that. And like literally, it was, I didn't realize at that time because also I'm a very obedient daughter. And so I kind of did what I was told to do and went for it and everything, not understanding why I was hurting so much inside and not able to put words on that. And being really like my dreams being crushed. And that lasted for years because, again, like I'm, you know, firstborn, wanted to be a good daughter, like, you know, and all that. And so when I was about 27, I was not that great at my studies just because I couldn't figure out what I wanted because I had given up on all my artistic dreams. And so I was okay, you know, I got kind of a job and stuff, and I was like, okay, I can do it. And one day I was like, okay, you're 26 or 27, and you can have a job. You're gonna have a job. You know what you're gonna kind of do with your life, and maybe it's time. And you've always worked. I always paid for my study. I had money. Like I was. I don't know. You said that when you were a supervisor, I think, at a high school. So I was doing that, and it was. So I had an okay life, and I was like, okay, maybe for once in your life, give yourself some time and do something that you really want to do. 27 is not that young, you know. I was already like, okay, it's time to get on with like a life, and but I was like, okay. At that time, what was interesting, I think, is like even though my parents really tried to push me into like a more normal type of career, all my friends were artists. Like I couldn't escape myself. My boyfriend was a musician, my best friend was a writer, all around me, and I was like, it tells me something. And I had an anxiety crisis. I had like a lot of things. Like I could feel like something was really wrong, and I had to explore something. So I told myself, okay, give yourself a year, and you're gonna. Okay, something happened actually. I was living in the south of France. All these people, creative people around me, but nobody was doing something that I could really see myself doing. And then one day I went to have a drink with friends, and I was at the cafe and sitting there having fun, and a girl sits next to me, and I'm like, oh, hey, start talking, and I realized, I asked her what she does and as a job, and she's an illustrator. And like, I can still remember the emotions that went through me. I couldn't speak I was like, this job exists, somebody that actually looks like, you know, you have to know that it was like a few years ago, and I didn't have internet to like be at the window to the world. I didn't know, like I was kind of looking, but my parents didn't let me go to an art school, so I didn't know people who were actually making a living with art. So suddenly meeting someone like that, it's just like, it was amazing. And I was like, can I ask you to come visit you in your studio? Can I come visit you when you're working and just tell me what you're doing? And she was like, of course. And so I went spend an afternoon with her, and she explained to me how she was working. And I decided that day, I was like, I'm going to give myself a year, and I'm going to try to do that. And so that's what I did.
We were just talking before the show about how powerful it can be to have someone like that as an example who does something that you didn't even know existed before.
Exactly.
Are you still in touch with this woman?
I'm not. I mean, I know what she does and stuff, and you know, I would be happy to see her, but we didn't become best friends. It's just like she opened the door and she opened my life, basically. And she probably doesn't even realize, because for her, I mean, she had access to all that. She knew, and she introduced me to other illustrators that had been to the same school, you know, because it's a network after that, and it's a world of possibilities and all that. So for her, probably she didn't realize or understand, like, what an influence she had on my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a couple years pass, and you start this blog.
So
And
yeah, so
I
let me
ask you,
explain
yeah.
those few years before I open. Like, so I tell myself you got a year. So in order to, because I was very stressed about life and so and all that, I was like, I need to make money and I need to, you know, and I tell myself, okay, if you can't make money, you're gonna have to go back to a normal job and all that. And so I stopped all my small jobs and put myself I have a little bit of money, and I'm like, you're gonna live on that because you're gonna put 100%. You don't want to be distracted on doing that. So I started doing it. I work at home. At that time, again, like internet was just starting, so I put a little bit of money aside to go to Paris. I told myself every 2 months, because I promised to myself that I wouldn't wait until I was ready to show my creative work, because I had seen with my friends that you get too caught in perfectionism and waiting for your illustration to be perfect, your music to be perfect, to show it to the world. And I didn't want to do that. So every 2 months I would go to Paris. And after a year, I was like, okay, so where am I? And obviously I was not a successful illustrator a year later, but I could feel something was happening and things were opening inside me and all that. So I was like, okay, give yourself a little more time. And after a few years, I had understood more who I am and stuff, but I was still not there. And I was broke. And I was getting at the end of those, you know, these, like, okay, I was an illustrator. I was working for a few magazines and stuff, but that's when I realized there is not enough money to be made in that job. Like, it takes a lot of time to become a successful illustrator. And that's what then meeting illustrators were like, oh yeah, everybody tells you that at art school, then it takes at least 10 years to become an illustrator, to build, you know, what you need to build to get like the right advertising job that's gonna, you know, and it's also a job you have to accept that you're not gonna make a ton of money anyway. So I was like, okay, so what can I do? I cannot afford to go to Paris, show my work anymore. These days of forming myself and changing life are over. And at that time I was starting to, because I was trying to showcase my work, I had started building a little website. So I bought myself a computer and learned HTML and all that, build a website. And doing all that, starting going on forums and stuff, I discovered blogs. And that's when I was like, you know what, here is my last try at having an artistic life. Because after that, I'm going to have to fold that, and I opened my blog.
And now 10 years later, here we are.
Yes, exactly.
Can you talk about how you came up with the name? I know it's a play on the French illustrator Garance Doré.
Yes. So Garance Doré is not my real name. At that time, so 10 years ago, the internet was like a wild place. Where your parents would be scared that perverts were gonna come after you. It was like nobody would like having a blog was considered like those people who have no friends, and sex messengers, like all these type of things. And I could see that there was something else happening, but just talking about it to the world, I was like. So I had a few rules. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to change my name. Like, I'm not going to talk about it to anybody. It's going to be kind of my secret and a few things like that. And one thing that I had learned that is pretty funny is that, so all the illustrators that I was meeting had very, I don't know how you would say here, but kind of noble like names. Because a lot of them, I mean, I have to say, come from, more like, families that can afford to have an artist in, and to just give that free. So it's kind of a certain society. And I was like, I wanted to belong so much. I was like, I'm going to give myself a name like the something. I don't know if here that means something, but, like kind of a noble type of name. And then I started trying, and it didn't work. I couldn't, I was like, this is not you, you're not going to be able to carry it. Like, in order to carry a name that's kind of gives you weight like that, you have to have the shoulders, and you have to, either it belongs to you, or, so I couldn't do that. But Doré is kind of, it's the name of one of the first French illustrators. It's very pretty, it's not that heavy. And I thought, okay, I can, and it means gold. And I think it was like a warm color, like that worked with me. And so I made, I had the last name, and then I, also at that time on the internet, it was a lot of like, names like, I don't know, Mimi 55, and things like that, like other bloggers.
Always with a number after.
Yeah, there was always this thing where it's, and I was like, I want to have something elegant. I want to have something that feels like a real person. And so I had my 3 best friends meet, and I was like, guys, I have that project. Don't tell anybody. I need a name. And this is the last time I picked. Can you help me find a first name? And we came up with Garance, and in the beginning I was like, ugh, no. And I don't know, it just sticked, and I to this day I still love that name, and my friends called me Garance and all that. And Garance is a color, it's a red, and so I love the fact that the name was actually made of 2 colors.
How did your family respond to this?
Okay, so first my family didn't know. Then I don't want to get too psychological with my mom and how she reacted with all that, but it was not easy because they were like, what the hell is she doing? Like, by that time, I was already the loser of the family. Like, I had not become what they wanted me to become. I was not making money. There was nothing, I think I was getting used to being the failure of the family. And now I was opening a blog. And as I was saying at that time, there was absolutely nothing cool about doing that. It was like, what's wrong with her? So when I started talking about it, it was like, whatever, what is she doing? It was actually a painful moment for me as like a daughter and all that. So that's the reaction I got. My dad was always awesome. My dad was just like, that's great, do whatever. Now I look back and I'm like, that's actually good. Like whatever I would do, it was like, you're probably right. You probably know what you're doing. But on the mom's side, it was more tricky. Yeah.
So I want to ask you another question, particularly about your illustration work. You started publishing the illustrations almost exactly 10 years ago in June of 2006. And going back and looking at them, I can see very clearly the evolution of your style over about the next year. And by sometime in 2007, the style is really recognizable as yours and what it has been until today. Can you talk at all about the impact that having a blog and having to post on a regular basis your designs and illustrations had on you as an illustrator?
Yeah. So when I became an illustrator before the blog, here is the problem that I had. I became an illustrator that took hours and hours. My illustrations were very elaborate. And I actually started having more recognition in the art world because it was, it was art pieces. It was like portraits and things like that. And that's also why I was like, I'm never going to make any money. Because I was like, a magazine, Glamour would call me and be like, hey, do you want to do a half page for us? And I was like, great. And they were like, okay, so we're going to pay you 200 euros. And then I would count the hours to make an illustration and divide them into 200 euros. And I'd be like, I'm going to starve and actually end up under the bridges like my mother told me. And so, and so when I opened my blog, it was a break in my creative ways. I was like, because that was also the few rules that I had with my blog. The rules are change your name. The second thing is publish 3 drawings a week and not more than 1 hour per drawing. So that was the idea. I was like, this time you're going to do... So the first illustration I posted on the blog was a totally new style for me. It was just, lines like I do. And the third rule was never say that you don't come from Paris. Because going to Paris every other month, I could realize that each time people were like, oh, this is great, like, we could work together, da-da-da. And each time I was like, okay, so this and that. I would mention that I was living in the south of France. And people were like, okay, bye, see you next time. And they would never call me back. I think that I don't really still understand why. And at that time, internet was there and you could actually really work. Like illustrators and editors don't meet, like it's over, like they just communicate. But I don't know, for some reason I think it's the dream you create around your art and your creativity and everything that I realized, okay, being from out of town, France being a very centralized, probably like America is, I don't know, like I feel like if you're creative you have to be New York or LA or something like that. So saying that I didn't say I live in Paris, but I never said I didn't. And so, of course, people assumed that I was living in Paris. And that's the follow-up of that story I have to tell you. But yeah, did I answer your question?
Yes.
So yeah, so then the style kind of came like that. And it changed and evolved. And yeah, of course, having to push myself to do, obviously, it doesn't take me an hour anymore. But in the beginning, that was my rule.
And so over that time, you branched out into different creative outlets. You added commentary to your posts.
Yeah.
You took up photography, then video, and more recently, podcasting.
Yeah, which is an
as
art.
well. When you and your team has an idea, when you have an idea for something or someone or a trend or a piece that you want to cover, how do you decide what the most effective medium is to use to communicate it, whether it's illustration or a photo essay or just a text blog post?
We don't really have, there is no boundaries to like how we want to do stuff. So it's just like talking and being like, oh, we want to talk about that person or talk about that thing. What would be the best way to do it? Usually one of the things is what's the most simply effective. Sometimes you think a video is going to be great, but then it's a big production. And I think working with a daily internet thing is that getting your message is, sometimes it's like the most simple is the better. And so that's something we're very good at. I think just like deciding, okay, we could do that giant production, but we could also do 5 photos and the message is more direct and stuff. And we usually pick that. And that's the same with illustrations. It's just like if you have to do it every day, you're gonna learn to be straight, direct, and fast. And I think that's something we've been pretty good at doing. While keeping a sense of quality. I think that's the one thing that why did the blog explode? And because the story, I don't know if you know, is that I opened the blog and not knowing what I was doing or whatever, and 3 weeks later a magazine called me, and I think 3 months later I was one of the most famous bloggers in France, which was nothing at that time, but it was a wave first wave of blogging took me like to where brands started calling me for this and that, and I was like, something is happening there. And I think 6 months later, not telling that I was not in Paris, people would call me and be like, hey, you want to come to our magazine this afternoon? And I would be like, yeah, sure. Still not saying that I was not living in Paris. So I would be like, oh, I'm very busy right now. I can't come this afternoon. Can we meet in 2 weeks? Time for me to like gather a few appointments and go to Paris. And that's when after a while I was like, okay, I think something's happening in my life right now. I'm going to take my 2,000 euros that I have and go live in Paris. And so the blog like really exploded, and it was very fast, very respected in fashion, because I think it was one of the first blogs that was talking about fashion in that way, and also that was taking the aesthetics of it very seriously. Like I have an eye for beauty, and that's something that I had been working on with my illustration, and I never, at that time, people thought of internet as something ugly that didn't need much work. Like images were not, they were small and they were crappy and all that, and I always thought, how can we make this better? I had been reading magazines all my life. I had an appreciation for that, and my first thing was like, I won't publish something that's not inspiring and beautiful. And I didn't do that for other people. It's just for my own pleasure, and I think that really like translated so well. And so I think it was the first blog where people, brands and all that felt comfortable calling me.
I read that Express article
Yeah.
last week, and in it you called the blog a secret garden, and I guess it didn't stay a secret for very long.
No, in the beginning I was like, I'm anonymous, I don't want to, my photo taken or anything. So I was just so shy and I didn't know how to respond. But yeah, very soon I had to change my mind about that.
I'm curious, based on what you just said, how you feel about how visual a medium the internet in general has become over the past several years with the rise of Instagram and Snapchat stories and all that.
Right? It's crazy.
And because on one hand, it sounds like exactly what you wanted in 2006, and on the other, it's totally crazy, and people project these perfect lives on Instagram and all that.
Which I probably started a little bit, because I was always like, so I think my thing is that I love beautiful images, but my texts are very raw and I talk about real stuff and all that. So there is that kind of double thing. Like you go on the blog and you're like, oh, this is cool and beautiful and I aspire to that, but it's also a real person talking, and she has troubles, and and so I think this really worked. I think what I feel frustrated with right now is that the stories are truncated, because it's very visual and you don't have. So that's why I do a podcast, that's why I keep writing, that's why I did a book, because I think you have to go deeper to understand. You can't just put an image like that, because then people have that problem, like, what is all these people with perfect lives around me? It's not true, obviously, and we all know it, but I'm a storyteller, and the images are just a part of it.
So the thing that I find most distinctive about your creative work is your voice and your writing voice, and both your speaking voice on the podcast. And I know that the people who work with you say that you're just like that in real life in comparison to the blog. And I wonder how you've been able to maintain that as you've grown your team and added more writers and creators to the blog. Like, do you give people guidelines? How do you think about adding more creative people to your team while still maintaining a certain perspective and tone?
Well, yeah, it's a lot about who you choose to work with and who you surround yourself with. And I think some people really understand the voice and really love it. But it's also about not trying to have people do what you do. I give them creative freedom. I just pick them, like Brie, our fashion editor. She doesn't have the same style as I do. She doesn't have the same voice, but I think her voice works in my world. And so I never try to make people like write like me. I just hope they have a sense of humor, self-deprecation, and are more real about, because our point of view about fashion is, we like something that's a mix of high and low, that doesn't take itself too seriously. We're very, we love comfort, we love to be able to live in our clothes and all that. So if you pick all these values kind of and have people around you that share them, it's easy. It's just that the hard part is finding them.
How do you screen for that?
We, like everybody, we have some moments where we're geniuses and some moments where, like, we make mistakes and we just, like, have to part with people. I think it's all companies have to go through that. We're not perfect, but I think, people stay. And so it's amazing because you're able to create real beautiful, like, work that's meaningful. And we just, I mean, obviously, with my story, I don't look at what school people went to. Also, I don't understand the schools in America. So I'm like, they're like, oh, I did this and that. I'm like, great.
Our college is not the same as your college.
No, it's totally it's a totally different thing. So I just don't get it. And so I just try to have if I see that I have some connection and, I just try to go like that. I'm very intuitive about how I hire, which is, I think sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it works because that's how the company was built. We're really building everything on emotion, intuition, passion, authenticity. So that's how we work.
When did you start to think about it as a company and a business?
Well, I started thinking about that when I met my boyfriend, Scott, that I'm not with anymore. But when I met him, so that's my first American man, taught me about business. So he was doing the same thing as I was doing. Well, here's the thing. Americans are amazing at not feeling like business is a good thing. In France, if you think business, you're thought about as like, I don't even know how to say it, but here, like, success, making money out of something you love is something that's very respected. Whereas in France, it's looked at like, or you're not an artist if you're trying to make money, or you're, So I was doing that photography outside of fashion shows in Paris, and I met this American man who was doing the same thing at the same time. And we started talking, and being French, I was very modest. It's kind of a fake modesty type of thing that we all have. And kind of pretentiously modest. So he would be like, oh, this is great, what you're doing. I'm like, oh, it's just a hobby, okay? It's just a hobby. I don't do that for a living. It's just like what I love. I'm an illustrator, I'm nothing else. And he was like, why are you thinking like that? This is crazy. Like, people are responding to what you're doing. The blog is just a passion, So we fought like that that's a great way to fall in love, right? It's like fighting. So we fought like that, and it was our first thing. But he opened my eyes to the fact that if you have something that people are drawn to and respond to and everything, you can make a business out of it. And it took me a while, as you probably know now, I'm very brainy, like thinking too much, going to the shrink 5 times to really like do any action. So after like maybe 6 months, I was like, he's right. I could actually see that blog and what's happening as maybe starting a business. But then it took like hiring my first assistant, 10 shrink sessions. All these things are very, very hard for me. And as I started and then arrived in America, and also, met with Emily, who's here. We were building the business together. Things started happening, and I overcame my blockages and stuff. And now I think I'm still like, sometimes it's hard, like seeing bigger and all that. All creatives that run companies have struggles, and I have them, but I try to be good about that and learn and all that.
So 10 years after having started your blog, if you were doing this today, would you still choose the blog as the format?
Today?
Yeah,
Like,
if you were starting from scratch right now.
Like I was? Oh, that's a good question. See, I didn't know what I was doing at that time. And so I caught a wave that it's just like timing in life, right? I have no idea today what I would do. At that time, I was not even, I didn't think that I would ever have like my biggest dream opening my blog was like, maybe a magazine editor will look at it, maybe. And that's it. So it's hard because I don't know what I would do if I was that lost today. I think I was just very lucky, and I didn't think, and that happened. Today is totally different. You can reach people so easily. I would probably try to do something on Instagram, I guess, but I would also feel like everybody's doing the same thing. So how do you stand out and all that? I would probably not feel confident enough in myself to be able to do something better than all these people who are already, looking for attention. So I really don't know what I would do, honestly. I can give advice to other people, but to myself that I was at that time, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me how quickly some of these platforms have proliferated, and there are people who just happen to be in the right place.
Yeah,
when
that's
they
the thing. It's
took
very
off.
hard. Like you work around this type of companies. People always are like, oh, we're going to do a viral thing. We're going to become important on it. You can't decide that. You never know. So maybe you try. Maybe I would say today, if somebody says, like, I want to do something and be noticed, I would be like, what is it that you want to do first? Like, what's of interest to you? What's your passion? Can you deliver something that nobody else is doing? So I think, that's what I would say is like, to be able to do something that's different, you really have to go deep inside yourself and find something that nobody else does, I guess.
Which isn't necessarily about being noticed.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to be noticed though. Like if you are, on a creative work is about being noticed, even if it's by 10 people. And that's what I always say. It's not about having 5 million followers. The important thing today, and it's going to be more and more like that, is, what's the quality of your followers? Do they understand what you do? Do they want to buy into it and everything? So that's what I would say to people today is like not try to reach to everyone. Like build a great community, around what you love doing. And if it's cooking, if it's, like this barn, like doing this, like, like create something around it that people are really going to want to follow. So that's what I say. So it is about following, but it's not about millions of followers. It's about the right followers.
How does your audience influence what you do and what you're hoping to do next?
A little bit, in the sense that I take their, I just finished my book tour, and so I met with a lot of my audience, and realized how. I knew, but this was another level of like how educated and passionate and funny and everything and what they want. I really tried to talk with them as much as I could as I was signing the book. And so it just like comforted me in that direction that I'm going. But usually, and that's something that I also think is very important, in 10 years, all the ideas and everything always came from the inside and not from what do people want. It was always like, what do I want to do? I really want to do a podcast. And it's not because I think there is a podcast movement. Like right now there is like a Snapchat movement, and I'm not really into that. So, I'm going to find a way to do it because, as a business now, I have to be present in many, but for me, I value the things that I really want to do with my heart. And I think that's the thing where you're I don't like that word, but tastemaker or something. You have to be bringing something, not just doing what people expect or like. So it's kind of a mix, but I would say 20% is what I hear from my readers, and 80% is like what excites me. What am I gonna be able to bring to them with passion and excitement and all that? And if it's like that, they will follow. And also sometimes, in 10 years, you're gonna lose followers and gain new ones, and sometimes, some things you do people will not like and fall out of love with you, but maybe more people will fall in love with a new thing you do. So I think it's also not being too freaked out about who's looking at me, and really doing things that I feel like I have something to say that's interesting. I feel like I have a message that's, that people find comfort in and want to come and meet me and all that. And so that's my mission, right? It's to deliver it. It's not to take it from other people. So, yeah.
Can you tell us about any new projects that you're working on?
Yes, we talked about it right before. Hey, do you have any projects?
You could say no.
No, I don't want to talk about this. He was asking me before, like, is there anything you don't want to talk about? I was like, I really don't have anything I don't want to talk about. So my new project, I'm starting to write my second book. I mean, write in my head for the moment, but like I have a pretty good idea of what I want to do, and it's going to be about wellness. About, being well in your body and in your mind. But it's always with a very, humorous take and I don't like giving advice. I more like to tell my life stories and what I learned along the way. And of course, with a real French point of view, because I think, there is a lot of things I wouldn't want to live in France right now. There's a lot of things that I don't think we do right, but definitely eating and the sort of art of life. There is something from the south of France where I come from that I really want to share with the world. What I've learned from that.
How do you treat writing a book differently from how you write for your blog?
I reread myself more. I try to. Honestly, I think that's one of the things that I learned is that don't put too much pressure on, it's a book, Or like if I ever do a movie or something, I don't want to think like, this is so heavy on my shoulders. I'm not going to be able to do it. I have to be, it's like with the blog, forcing myself to write every day. After a while, just doing it, and that's how I find my voice, my writing voice and stuff, just because I was like, just write what's natural to you. And with the book, I just did the same thing. And I think, the only thing is I gave these texts more time. I mean, I've learned with the blog that if I write a text, in advance and I have time to reread it, it's going to become better at each, correction and stuff. So I do that. And also the book is like a message in itself. So you have to kind of have an arch and everything in how you do it. So that's the difference. But if I want it to be real, I don't want to hide behind my words or my formulas or anything. So I try to stay very natural in the way that I write.
Did you write Love Style Life in French?
I did in English and in French. I did whatever, sometimes I leave a story in English. It's much easier for me to write it in English. And then I have a good editor. I was like, I don't know if, I'm French, so, but I think it's, it's a certain style and I have a very good editor. And then some stories, I wrote them in French and then translated them. It's a very intuitive type of work that I did.
Were there any concepts in the book that you found difficult to translate between the languages?
Not really. I think it's that's what I'm lucky that I live here because I can understand now the sense of humor, like what my words mean. Sometimes I also ask, and I'm lucky that I have a team that understands right away, or like people, when I ask, what does that exactly mean? And they will not tell me that what the word means, but what, the concept and everything. Because sometimes you don't understand the story there is behind a word, and so you have to have a dictionary won't tell you, but people will.
So you conceived this book as sort of, I don't want to say a guide.
It's totally a guide,
but a guide to being a modern, stylish woman and how to think about being a modern, stylish woman. Yeah. And I was wondering if there were any books that really define style for you, whether while you were growing up or more recently.
No, that's why I wanted to write that book. I wanted to, I think style is really something that comes from who we are inside. And I wanted to find a book that had, at the same time, I have no shame in, subjects that are very superficial. I adore that. I am a magazine reader, but I'm also a big self-help book reader, and I also have no shame in that. I think there is so many lessons we can learn that are amazing, but I'm also a literature reader, and so I wanted to bring all that, and I want to call it a guide in some way, but just like I was able to do my type of guide where it's very, personal, but talks to everyone, and also delivers a point of view on style that, yes, there is a few things where it's like, okay, this is the clothes that I think will, be with you until, for years, and you will love them. And this is, I took the photos myself and everything. But there's also like how to be a stylish woman from the inside, how to be a good daughter, how to be a good friend, how to be elegant in the way you interact with people. So things like that. There is a chapter about etiquette, which is probably one of my favorite because, we're in a time where, I'm French, my culture is totally different. I get here in America, I don't understand anything about thank you notes and all these things. And, I have to learn. And so I want to talk about that. So it's, to me, style is all that.
When you think about style as you travel, as you've traveled over the past several years for work, what are some of the cultural differences that were particularly striking to you, whether coming here to America or going elsewhere?
With style?
Yeah, in terms of how people think about style, how they define it around the world.
Well, I think what's striking now is, and it's sad for me as a photographer, is that it's becoming the same thing everywhere. And I really see the difference from when I started, and obviously it's internet, which is a wonderful tool, but also is going to make, everything is kind of the same. And at the same time, we have fast fashion, which I also love, Zara and all these things that sell the same clothes in every city in the world. So that's what's most striking to me. But then I think when you look deeper, I think every country has something different to say with fashion, and it's very ingrained in their culture, how our mothers raise us and all that. And so I don't know, the difference is, it depends on the countries, every country has their different things that they want to say with their clothes.
I want to switch gears and talk about fashion a little bit. What's exciting to you right now in fashion?
Oh my God, this is the most difficult subject right now for me. I want to, so I started as an outsider, was taking photos outside the shows, and then fashion really embraced me and invited me, and I became, I don't know how to say, I was sitting front row at fashion shows, designers wanting to meet me and all that, because I was doing that work that was kind of new, and became the insider of the insiders, right? Know everyone and all that. And I think in life, and it's probably coming from where I come from, I'm more like a spectator of things. I like to write on things, and I like to be not too much of insider, because then you lose your distance from things. So I'm trying to be more of an outsider again, so I can write. So right now, fashion to me is, I'm trying to find my inspiration again. And I love it. I love clothes and everything, but I'm trying to see, because again, my role is to be inspiring and to be exciting and to communicate that love of fashion. But being too much on the inside, I was like, I don't want to. It's like seeing the back of, a movie or something. The movie is not as beautiful and as inspiring. So how can I be, again, sitting in the outside and looking in, and so that's what I'm doing. But sorry, it's not so much style, my answer, but that's where I am right now.
I think I've heard a lot of people say that it's important to maintain that perspective.
Very important, yes. When you want to be a good writer, I think, or unless, your thing is like, hey, I'm an insider, let's talk about this person, that person, but that's really not what I want to do. I always consider myself as my readers. I'm more on that side, and I'm not saying that I'm, cool, but it's really I want to be there. I want to be on the outside, and it's more fun because you can, have that distance and all that. And I think that's why people like what I do, is because I like, hey, Marc Jacobs is my best friend or something. It's not my thing.
So I follow fashion very distantly. And one of the reasons for that is similar to what I've found with the way the technology world is covered, is like everybody's in bed with everybody else and nobody is providing a real honest perspective on what's happening. And the standard that I think about a lot is this guy James Wood, who writes for The New Yorker, and he reviews books for The New Yorker. And he's amazing. And I can read a review in which he completely hates the book that he's reviewed, but you want to read it anyway because he's engaged with it at such a deep level. And I'm wondering if you think there's anyone who does that with fashion.
Yeah, there is someone called Kathy Horin who writes for the. I mean,
yeah, I've read.
She came back, I think.
She's been doing some stuff for System magazine.
Yeah, exactly. And she's someone that you can trust that she will give her opinion. But it's also she was writing for the New York Times, and they have high standards when it comes to journalism and all that. And so of course, like in every industry, when you start being an insider, you get presence and you know the people, and it becomes very difficult to criticize. Criticizing has never been my thing. I've never been a critic of fashion shows and all that, so it's something that I'm happy I never tried to do or something, because it's definitely opening Pandora's box. How are you gonna keep authentic and all that? But in fashion, it doesn't exist anymore. I think the money has kind of taken over, and it's difficult to get a real review.
Where do you seek inspiration outside of fashion?
Well,
what do you do? Where do you go?
Of course, traveling, Pinterest, books, my friends, like, of course, all these outside things. But I'm 41, and I feel like what's the most inspiring is how we personally evolve and change, and our points of views, and our like that human adventure. Like what I'm living is probably the most fascinating thing, and that's I would say probably where because you don't stay the same, right? Every day you're a different person. Every decade your point of view on things completely different. And that's wonderful as an artist, because it gives you're like, I never get out of ideas, because not only the world is changing around me, but I'm changing with it. And so there is so much to say.
Are there any people that you want to collaborate with, that you know you want to collaborate with, that you haven't yet?
There is a ton of people that I want to meet, and then maybe there will be a collaboration, but I don't have like a fixed thing. Like the only thing that I'm always dreaming about is like somebody writing songs for me. Because I've always wanted, I love singing, but like a loser, like, in my shower and stuff. But it's something where like, oh, one day I will do a song or something, I don't know, like that. But it's ridiculous, I don't know.
Well, with that, I'd like to open it up to questions from all of you guys. If you have a question, please stand up and say it, and I will repeat it back, and Garance will answer. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, you right here.
Hi.
It's Abigail. Thanks for coming here. So being from Europe, from France, what was it that brought you to New York rather than you were in Paris, but rather than staying in Paris or London, what caught you in New York and has kept you there?
Yeah, sorry, I'm
So
looking at you, and there is the light right there. Just like.
So the question is, what brought you to New York from France?
Yes. So the love guy that I had was living in New York, but it was not okay. Funny story. I was thinking of going to meet him in New York and live with him, and we had a giant fight at some point where I was like, I'm going to break up with him. But I was like, oh no, because then I can go to New York, right? and I was like, who says that, you can't go to New York if you're not with him? You break up with him and then you go to New York. You do both, and you're like, hey. So I ended up staying with him, but I do think that I really wanted to leave for many reasons. So I moved to Paris, and I didn't like it. I felt like I came from a very warm environment and all that, and there it was gray and cold, and people were not so nice. They're very cliquey. It's very difficult to get like people to embrace, that. And also what I was talking about, you have to know, like it's so crazy. Like when I started and I really worked a lot, I was passionate about what I was doing, and people were criticizing me in France for, being successful. Like who does she think she is? And I remember because there was like a group of bloggers that I started kind of with. We were in the same movement. It was like, oh, the new fashion bloggers. And I read an interview of one of them at that time, and she was like, oh, we all knew that Garance was working way more than all of us. And it was said in a way that's like, poor her. And so I thought this was stupid. I was like, if I want to make this thing something, if I take it seriously, why am I getting so much doors closed and attitude and criticism? And obviously, I started coming to New York like this, and the doors were wide open, and people wanted to hear about what I had to say, and they were like, "That's amazing!" And I felt like this was my home right away. But not just New York, like just the positivity of, the American way of life and all that, and that like unapologetic way of wanting to embrace who you are and embrace success and all that, and that that's why I want to be here. It's very, very important in my life. It changed my life, definitely. And New York specifically, obviously fashion, though I might change one day. I don't know. It's a very stressful place to live in.
Are there other places in the U.S. or elsewhere where you think you might want to live someday?
Yeah, I'm thinking about LA because
it's the new Brooklyn?
Unfortunately, I haven't been so original with that one. Wish that would be more surprising, but it's a place where you can still work and be in, the movement of what's happening.
And you can actually afford some space.
Well, it's more like I don't know. First, it's just like the winters here are hard for me, and I come from Corsica. It's very sunny and more like LA and all that. And I do feel the stress. Also, here's one thing that I feel in New York that I probably is the same in LA, but when you get to a new city, it gives you so many stories to tell. It's amazing. You meet new people. There is really that thing. But I feel like New York is really a city that's about success, achievement, and sometimes you get kind of lost in the dreams of others. And the blog is 10 years old, and I have goals in my life that have, shifted, and, what we're doing on my career side, like the company is still like at the forefront of everything, but maybe like taking, a little bit of distance could be good to bring something new.
And get away from the fashion industry for a little while.
A little bit, yeah.
Other questions? Yes, you in the front. Why don't I take you in the front first?
Right. Hi, I'm Sheila. And thank you for coming tonight. I was curious, when you dress, do you dress for an event, or do you dress for what you simply want to wear that evening or that day or that morning? Is it really about you pushing a style that makes you comfortable, or something that you think will please other people?
So I'm going to paraphrase the question, which is whether you dress, this might be a bit too much interpretation, but whether you dress entirely for yourself, or you think about what you're going to have to do that day, where you're going to have to go, who you're going to be seeing.
It's a very good question because it's been a struggle for me. Because I do have to attend some red carpet events and all that. And my style and what I've always talked about and how I started actually and why the blog became so successful is because my dream was to talk about everyday fashion. I love that. I think, fashion editorials were too complicated. I couldn't find anything to actually wear in there. And so evening wear and all that has always been tricky. Lately, I think I've finally started understanding what I like, but it's such a learning experience because that's not my passion. And so trying to find a dress for an event, but you have to do it. So I dress for myself, but I try to also, be respectful of what is expected of me, and I also try to do it in a way that's a little bit new. I feel like evening wear and cocktail wear has stayed the same for so long. The gown, all that. I try to challenge it when I can, but I have curves and I don't have like a model's body, and so for me it's also always try to respect that and not show an unattainable or make-believe things, but still look cool. So it's a lot of different things, a lot of work, which sometimes I hire a stylist to help me, because it's a lot of work, and I think for every woman these type of things are really a challenge, and I think we're not very helped by the media and everything, because it's one image, it's one body, it's one, and it's hard for me. It's probably even harder for people who don't have access to what I have access to. So yeah.
Next question.
You have to know we don't really see so much in the back, so we're like, woo-doo-doo. Yeah.
Well, I'll ask a question, Ricky. So, Garance, first of all, this is absolutely enchanting.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I wish you were going to ask more questions, because I love talking.
So, probably 30 years ago, I saw a remarkable exhibit at the Whitney Museum of the fashion photographer Norman Parkinson. Mm-hmm. And I had never seen fashion photography that moved me before. And I mean, I don't read a lot of magazines. I did work at Cosmopolitan magazine for 2 years, but one of the things I loved about those images were I felt that some of them regarded women in an introspective way. The women seen in the photographs seemed to be really engaged in themselves, more sort of inwardly than outwardly. I just wonder whether there are image makers in the fashion world, whether they're photographers or illustrators, who have inspired you or who you like in particular, even as you're competing with them.
Yeah.
So the question, prefaced by Julie's having seen a Norman Parkinson exhibit at the Whitney, that struck her for how moving it was, and also how the women in the photographs were depicted in a way that, correct me if I'm wrong, Julie, revealed something about their interior lives rather than just their exteriors. Yeah. And Julie wanted to know if there are image makers, whether they're photographers or illustrators or stylists and editors, who you really admire.
There are many that I admire. There is one photographer that always really touched me, and that you probably know, who's Peter Lindbergh. And I really love what you said about women kind of looking inward. I think it's a very important concept that I'm going to talk about in my next book, the connection with yourself. And I love Peter Lindbergh because his photos are very emotional. He doesn't care about clothes at all. So the editors really struggle to put clothes on the models, because he always wants to put them in like a big coat, and they're on the beach and they're like that, and it's beautiful. And I love him because he loves life and women, and he will keep their wrinkles. He will photograph women of every size, and they're stunning in the photos. They're stunning, and I think this is, to me, like, he's one of the most inspiring photographers, and I was lucky to meet him as he was shooting Kate Moss on a I went for 2 days to cover a backstage, and he's the most wonderful person. And so I would say, like, he's, how usually when you start, I work in kind of the show business now, so I've met a lot of my idols and all that, and a few times, most times I've been a little bit disappointed, and very few times I've been even more inspired because I know them, and he's one of them. He's one of the photographers that and he's been a friend since then, very, very kind, and so it's one of these things where the art is, so connected to the person. So he's definitely my choice.
Some of the Peter Lindbergh photos that I love the most are ones that didn't end up being published, that were, like behind the scenes, and where you can see him really interacting with the women in the photographs.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? I'm going to take you in the back first.
Well, thank you for this. It's really great to meet you, and I love your book.
Thank you.
You're talking about going inside yourself, and that passion that you have inside is the most important. And I was just wondering, do you feel free, completely free, and what is freedom for you?
The question is around looking inside yourself. I assume in the context of creative work, but also in life in general, and how you define freedom for yourself.
Mm-hmm. I think I feel free in the sense that I feel there is no boundaries to what I can do, but I feel sometimes conditioned in my mind, and I think that's the life that's going to be my life story, is reclaiming, who I am and understanding what I want. I think it's probably every woman and every man is like that, but I think that's the passion. That's the passion that I have, is that, and I think I'm in a moment of my life, turning 40 is a very important moment, and so I think that's when I learned really like that deep connection, the fact that you're your own best friend basically, and it's guiding me towards finding my own definition of freedom. It's different for everyone, so yeah, that would be my answer to your question. I think it's right now I really, and that's going to be more and more part of my message, is to not listen too much to what people are telling us that is success or failure or whatever. I think it's really like finding that definition inside ourselves.
So I think we have time for one more audience question. You?
Yes. My question really is, to preface it, I'm impressed with something in all of your conversation about balance. Mm-hmm. So I hear, first of all, the balance between wanting to be a good daughter, wanting to be yourself, or the balance between, even most recently, where, to Sheila's question, you want to dress in a way that's comfortable for you, but at the same time to respect the event. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a very fundamental trait, but I wonder if it's partly a result of being French, because I often think of the French like that, or do you think, so it's cultural, or do you think it's you, or both?
The question is where your sense of balance comes from, and balance in being able to consider multiple perspectives when making a decision about something, whether they're coming from inside yourself or outside yourself, and whether that is something that's uniquely French, or where does it come from?
Yeah, it's always been very important part of my life, that tension I have between everything. So, being a bumpkin from Corsica and living, in the most fashion cities, it's in everything. I couldn't, everything is like that. And the people who know me know that I'm very much about, I love extremes. I love things that are very different. And I think a lot of things that I have to do is reconciliate all that and make it work for myself, which is why probably LA can work for a moment, because I really want to live in New York, but I also really want to live upstate. And because so it's all these things, and the looking for balance. I think maybe what we do in France that's interesting and good is that we try to not define ourselves too much, not put too many labels, and embrace. And it's unconscious. It's not even like embrace, but like those contradictions that we're made of, and not oh, I am that girl. No, it's like a mix of things, and I have the right to love something and love also something else that's completely different. So yeah, but sometimes it's difficult because I'm also very, I can be very French and negative in some way, like, ugh, I hate the red carpet, I don't want to go, and then have terrible FOMO and be like, why didn't I go? This was such a bad idea. So, you know, trying to be at peace with all these things, and, you know, as I get older, I guess, I accept all that better. And also this problem of balance is something that my team is suffering a lot from, because I have a very hard time making a decision. So I'm also trying to become more decisive, which you have to be if you want to grow and if you want to be a real boss and all that. You can't let other people make decisions for yourself. You have to take responsibility. And so it's that balance, but also knowing that there is no wrong answer. It's just a choice. So that's all these things that I'm trying to learn right now. Putting all this together and being a full person, you know, that's the goal.
I think that's a great place to end our show tonight. Thank you, Garance. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.